celebrating the birthday of Martin Luther King Jr. You allowed me to be a part of the strength of a dream. I went back home and told the story. Because our executive director had told us to tell it, I told it. I was in Chicago and I talked about Dr. Langston. I went back, I got on radio, and I began to take my radio audience through the Afro-American Center, Mr. Brown. Then up to a department where a good-looking black man headed that department. When I finished my story, my radio calls began to come in, and they said, "Oh, Clara, you didn't have to come down here and tell us that. We don't believe that about Indiana State University. You know, Indiana's where you have a lot of Ku Klux Klanners and what have you." Well, I had to follow it up, and I said, to my friends in color, black and white, I don't care what you believe. That's what's happening at Indiana State University. And if you don't believe it, you go to Indiana State University and you will see a black head of a department with the same rights and privileges of other departments. So I needed to come back and tell you that I told it everywhere I've gone. Told it last night to the CBers, 5,000 of them. Next week I'll be in New Mexico. I shall tell the story. I needed to come here tonight to see you honor your workers. And I would like to congratulate each one of you, because truly you are the backbone of the civil rights movement. You are the unknown and unsung heroes. Somewhere down the line, somewhere in the annals of time, you are going to be recognized as those that really put it together. Finally, I needed to see that Yates perform. You know, Yates was a young man when I first met him, ambitious, and he was a scholar, and he came to our movement, and I said, "Yates, I hate to tell you this, but it's tough for white people that's in the movement. In fact, they are tougher on whites than they are blacks." Well, he didn't believe me. Promising medical school during real well. Then he went to jail, and all hell broke out. Now, for some reason, Yates thought I was going to feel sorry for him, but I said, "Yates, I told you white folks don't have no business coming out here and this kind of stuff." Let me tell you what Yates did. Yates went to jail, word the jailer down. The policeman was sick of him. And then when we would go to try to go in some place to eat, Yates taught us something that none of you know, not even the vice president of this university, because you don't learn this in a university. All these educators, you don't know how to do this. See, when we used to sit in, there would always be a rope here, and we could go so far and somebody would hold the rope and wouldn't let us in. So Yates told us one day, "I'm going to teach you a lesson in snotology. This is a process of making snot run out of man's nose." And we thought it was a joke. But he told us, and he angled us in, this was his mathematical knowledge, and put us at certain angles, and then you can put your eyes at a certain spot on a man. And he loses control of something up here, and snot began to run down his leg. When you got Yates, you got something. And the thing that's going for him is beautiful, understanding wife. Now, while he was playing that music, she was up here. And then he had two beautiful kids. Seemed like yesterday that Donetta and David were just little babies. I'm so proud of them. I'm so proud of them. So happy to be home with all of you. Now, this morning I left Oklahoma City at 5:30. Had the opportunity to stay in an airplane with a lot of people in St. Louis. Then I had the opportunity to try to call in to your city. Oh, it was difficult. Finally got it. Then I made it to Terre Haute, and I got off the airplane, and I said, "Thank you, God." And I have so many things to thank God for. I just don't know where to start. But then I looked, And there he was, the man that you honor today, Mr. Warren Clevenger. I've known Warren through the years, and we have been together in practically every NAACP convention and event. I remember in Philadelphia when we were going into Washington on that train ride, you were there. And I remember when we got ready to leave, you said, no, I'm going to stay here and do NAACP work, and you saluted us. We salute you. But then I asked him what kind of car was he driving. He told me a Honda. And I began to think about the condition of the highway and my business, and I don't trust men too much anyway. And what business would I have riding down this slick highway with Warren Clevenger? Well, I had a dream, and I got on that highway. It's a silly dream, but I would have to share it with you. I dreamed that Warren died and went to heaven. And when he got there, there was a few people there. The mayor was there. Mr. Brown was there. I don't think the judge back there was there. Head of the Afro-American Studies, I think he was there. But anyway, he really didn't go to hell first, according to my dream. He went to heaven. And when he got there, St. Peter was standing at the door, and St. Peter said, "Who are you?" And he said, "I'm chairman of the membership drive from Terre Haute, Indiana." So St. Peter wasn't going to get in trouble with the NAACP, so he said, "Okay, go on in." So he went in, and in place of feasting on milk and honey, he was around asking everybody in heaven, "Now, you remember the NAACP, are you?" So then he asked St. Peter if he could be excused for a while. St. Peter said to Warren, "Why do you want to go?" And Warren said, "I want to go to hell." And St. Peter said, "You're unusual. Most people that come up here don't want to leave." And Warren said, "I just got to go to hell. I got to go to hell. And there's some people down in hell I want to see." So St. Peter let him go. Weeks passed, nobody heard from Warren. Now, this was my dream. Finally, we got word about him in heaven. We said, "Well, we better go check on Warren." Went to check on Warren, called down there and called the devil and said, "Hey, what's Warren doing down there?" And the devil said, "He's down here selling NAACP memberships, and he's in conference with me now." So the devil stopped talking to us and told us to hold on the line, and Warren was talking to him, and Warren talked him in notion of buying an NAACP membership. And when he did that, he forgot to turn up the fire, and he looked around and hell was cold. Thank you for the flower. To the distinguished president of the NAACP, the Honorable Mr. Leidy, the mayor of this beautiful city, the members of the executive committee, ladies and gentlemen. I am a black woman. I was born of America, born of her dreams and her aspirations. I'm a black woman. My forefathers came to America as slaves and lived in the bowels of slavery for a long, long time. But they dreamed of freedom. They dreamed of freedom, and tonight we've come here to tell it. We've come here because not only am I a black woman, but I am part of you, each one of you. Because together we have been placed in a position to mold the greatest ideal of government that has been conceived by the minds of men. Now we've been called upon to tell it. Yes, my history has been different from other people's history. And then when I look at it in its open nakedness, it becomes so similar to those Americans that came to America looking and seeking for a better way of life. And I find a thread of understanding that exists. between my fellow Americans and I. I stand here tonight knowing that those men and women that came from the fields of Ireland when the potato crop had failed, those men that have escaped the horror of other countries, I feel a kinship with them. And somehow, in some way, I believe that together we will find our similarities and we will march down the road toward the fulfillment of our dreams together. Yes, I'm a black woman. And last month, the President of the United States proclaimed February as Afro-American Month. And I'm proud of those fellow Americans that decided that they would get in the act and join us. I had the opportunity to stand with IRS workers from over my district and talk about my blackness and how my blackness was really their blackness. I had the opportunity to go to Tinker Airfield, sit down with the generals and the men that have represented us all over the world in the Air Force. And I had the opportunity to tell them about my blackness. Because I believe that my blackness really was simply my country and my responsibility toward that country. Oh, I'm proud of the NAACP. The NAACP is in my bones, it's in my blood, it's my sweat. And when I saw people receiving honors tonight for doing something for NAACP, I felt good inside. And I said, I've got to tell it. And I'm not one of these discouraged Americans. Because I know enough about the history of my country to know that when the men in 1787 were pondering over the rewriting of the Articles of Confederation, there were some that did not believe. I know enough about history to know that Samuel Adams and Patrick Henry would not participate in the writing of the Constitution of the United States. In fact, they believed that it would not work and it would be a waste of their time. I'm not discouraged because some people don't see what those of us in NAACP see. I'm not discouraged and I'm not tolerant toward it. Because with me, NAACP is business, freedom's business. And I have made my guidelines. If you're my mayor, you're not a member of the NAACP, then I do everything that I can to keep you from being my mayor again. I try to put it to you very bluntly. I say to the man that I buy my $1.21 gasoline from, are you a member of the NAACP? And he says no, and I say, stop the pump. Stop the pump, brother. You will not get my money because that money was made by the sweat of my brow. I'm a teacher in the Oklahoma City school system, and it was an Emma Freeman case. Black school teachers standing in front of the Board of Education asking, give me a raise like you are the white teachers. And the Board of Education said, no, we can't pay you the same as white teachers. And it was the NAACP that stood in front of the judge and said, it must be done. And you mean to tell me that I'm receiving the same pay as white teachers, and I'm going to take my hard-earned money and give it to somebody, whether they're black and white, who's not associated with the NAACP? It's hard, it's tough, but it's business. Let us examine then, Clara, why are you so determined? Why is it that you have 4 kids and you adopted a girl 6 years ago and picked her up and said, Shelley, I want you to remember me for many things. But 100 years after I die, I'm going to leave enough money where every year I can become a member of the NAACP, and I want you to become a life member. It's a serious business with me. But let's look at it. Let's look at the picture. Let's review the story briefly. Let's look at those 20 black people that came here in chains. Let's look at the work of the abolitionists and black people crying out for freedom. Let's listen to Sojourner Truth, who served as an encouragement for Frederick Douglass to go on. Oh, they tell me that was a beautiful story, but Frederick Douglass had talked about freedom a long time. And then in his midst of talking about freedom, and it seemed so far away, he became discouraged. And here was an old black woman, uneducated, didn't know a bee from a bullfrog, but she heard about this young black that had educated himself. She went to hear him. When she got there, he was tired. He was telling the people that it was not going to happen, and this black woman began to move up to the front. And she said, Frederick, does God live? Does God live? Frederick looked and saw the sun. Frederick had to answer. He said that never again did he become discouraged. But I want you to understand the story, because Benjamin Hooks has told us to tell it, and we've got to tell it. See the story. Men and women crying for freedom. Seeing a country divided on the interpretation of the Union, and within the interpretation of the Union rested the freedom of my people. Oh, I used to like to hear my great-grandmother talk about it, the day that freedom came. She told us that they called it Jubilee Day in Texas. They didn't get the word until the 19th of June. See, my great-grandfather got down on his knees and about 10 o'clock and said, I'm not going to move until 12 o'clock because I want to be on my knees when freedom comes. Dreaming of freedom. Dreaming of going to the ballot box. Dreaming of owning land. Dreaming of getting married where you can get legal papers. And then the day came. The Emancipation Proclamation of War Necessity. The 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendment. And my forefathers say, free at last. But then, political maneuvering began. The black codes, the Jim Crow laws. Who's going to help now? Where are those loud voices that were crying out for the freedom of the black man? So tonight, we salute those courageous men and women who in 1909 got together. Now I want you to look closely at who got together. Black men and white men, black women and white women got together and say, we are going to form an organization that will get us out of the situation that we are in, because it's an embarrassing situation. No nation can cry out, this is a democracy, and still deny part of its citizens the fruits of a democracy. What are you going to do now? The Hayes-Tilden election. The troops have left, and now you're at the mercy of the states. The NAACP understood that, and in 1909, those men and women say, we are going to knock out segregation in America. Clara, why are you so dedicated to NAACP? Why does it become such a serious thing for you? I'm from Hoffman, Oklahoma. One thing that I'm proud of, my family. A lot of people tell you black people don't have strong family ties. But my grandmother could hardly read and write, yet in our house it was dedicated to education. She taught us how to count, and when she went as far as she could, she said, go learn something else and I'll bake you a cookie. And God knows I wanted that cookie. Oh, we believed in education. But up the street was a white school, and we used to slip and go up there, and I've never seen so many books in all my life. And as a child, I used to say, oh, if I could just get in there and read those books. And I went to Grayson High School, 5 miles away. Sometimes we'd be reading along on page 12, and the next page was 79. I didn't understand what a microscope was, and I never shall forget the day they brought a microscope into my school. Kids gathering around, we'd studied the parts of the microscope. We came in there, we were ready to look at the amoeba and discovered that we didn't have any lens. I saw my first amoeba when I went to Langston University. You talk to me about segregation. You talk to me about denying me the right to read and to grow and learn when I was a child. And then you ask me if I'm a member of the NAACP. Are you a fool? Graduated from Grayson High School and went to Langston University, and thank God for Langston University. Because it took somebody as dumb as me and gave me an outlook on books and ideas. And then finally, my classmate, Ada Lloyd Sipuel, went to the Supreme Court because she was crazy enough to go down to OU and say, I want to go to law school. Then the NAACP said, Ada, if you want to go, we'll put you there. Going around trying to sell black and white people NAACP memberships, and they pulling the Thomas Act on me. I died. You will never get into Oklahoma University. And as I stand here tonight, I feel embarrassed because I got into that university before my classmate Ada Lloyd Sipuel. Once they opened the doors of that university, we rushed in because we wanted master's degrees and we wanted to earn and we wanted to develop our brains to the fullest potentials. Now come with me to Oklahoma University, the only black in the social science department. And then a professor looks at me, and I'm in this strange land of whiteness because I had looked at whites from the other side of the fence. And in my own mind, when they denied me the right to eat in a restaurant, and when I had seen my brother die in Henryetta, Oklahoma, because they wouldn't admit him to a hospital, when I had seen my daddy work day and night, and then at the end, sometimes the man would forget to pay him. And I saw the look on his face, and he said, I said, Daddy, what are you going to do? He said, I can't do nothing. But the little money I get, I'm going to educate my children, but I don't ever want you to have to do what I've had to go through. And I said, Daddy, don't worry about it. I won't do it. And now the professor looks at me, the classroom, and he says to me, I've never taught a nigger, and I've never wanted to. I looked at that doctor with all of his education, and I say to myself, brother, you don't know this one, because this nigger knows how to mix the alphabet. I can go in and perform surgery on that nigger and make it one of the greatest rivers that the world has ever seen. And I sat there in that class. I could hardly wait for test day. Did you want to see this nigger perform? And the man was silly enough to ask me the most simple question I'd ever conceived. What do you think caused the Civil War? Then sitting in that audience was an old man named G.W. McLawn. G.W. McLawn had a master's degree number 1, a master's degree number 2, and a master's degree again. And he wanted to go there because he wanted to make it easier for others. And he filed a lawsuit against the state of Oklahoma, ending up in the Supreme Court of the United States. And the Supreme Court of the United States said to Oklahoma University, you've got to move the ropes. There will be no discrimination within this school. And then if you can see Clara Luper sitting there with other classmates. And then you're going to ask me if I'm a member of the NAACP. Do you think I'm a fool? And if it's anything I remember from my childhood experience, how I enjoyed feeding a dog. Because once you feed a dog in the evening, he'll run up to you and jump on you. But oh, I hate to feed them hogs. Take all your slop. Won't even look up. And won't even say thanks. Now, in the classification of people that appreciate, don't classify me with the hog. Don't let me be able to go to Oklahoma University. Don't let me be able to see J.C. Watts and Billy Sims and everybody running, and then I'm not a member of the NAACP. I'm not a hog. I don't act like a hog. No. Now, am I one of the stories that my grandma told about someone that had a peculiar disease known as leprosy? 10 of them got healed, and only one came back. And I have to look in the mirror and say, Clara, are you one of the 9? Somebody going to heal me for a disease that would put me away from everybody else, and I don't have sense enough to go back and say thanks? Yes, I'm a black woman. And I looked forward to 1954. I was teaching a class in 1954. I wanted to go to Washington, D.C. I wanted to see Thurgood Marshall, who had argued the Oklahoma cases in front of the United States Supreme Court. But I couldn't go. But the news came. And it was interesting. The Chief Justice of the United States said that segregation in education had no place in America. I was teaching in an all-black school. When we got ready to play a football game, we would have to leave school at 12 o'clock in the day in order that we could get to Hugo, Oklahoma, to play a game at 7. And a midday I would go to with my pep club. And the next morning it would be 7 a.m. when we returned back to Oklahoma City. Because the law stated that blacks and whites couldn't go to school together. The law. And 9 was 1954. Thurgood Marshall, NAACP, your dollars, standing there at the Supreme Court. And now they are saying that segregation in education has no place. And now I could go within 1 mile and play a basketball game, a football game, a debate tournament. And you tell me I'm not supporting the NAACP? Do you think I'm a fool? Tell it. If you think I'm that ungrateful, then I was moved to a white school and all hell broke out. Because I'd been arrested that time over 20 times. And because there were many people in my state that just didn't like me. And I'm sorry that I didn't have time to worry about why. But I was on my way to school. Northwest Classen High School, where your upper people go. And I walked in that school that day and I was proud because I knew how to teach. And a group of white boys saw me coming and they say, hey, nigga. I said, yes, I better teach you your first lesson as your teacher. So I rushed to the end of the hall and I said, may I help you? The poor little children started trembling. And I said, I knew how anxious you were to meet your teacher. I'm Mrs. Luper and I don't want you to forget. And in a few minutes, a white teacher came up to me and she said, Clara, Miss Luper, I don't know what to call you. I don't know whether to call you colored, black, Negro, or what. And I said, I better teach this educated teacher a lesson. Now, you read a lot about my nonviolent activities I've done on the battleground. But here we are in the educational circle. And I am what is known as a violent teacher. I'll knock the hell out of you in a minute. Oh, I had many experiences. White parents calling the principal, telling them that they didn't want their kids in my room. The principal, nervous, called me to his office and say, Mrs. Luper, I'm sorry, but I've gotten calls that the parents are not going to let you teach their kids. I said, good. I would like to draw my salary for 1 year without teaching one child. And then the opening day came. And they came in my room, scared to death. And I scared them. I knocked on the desk and I say, hey! I'm of African background, and when people don't get up my left, I beat drums. But I think I communicated with those young people because, after all, now, I'm Clara Luper, your teacher. I have a unique job, and those of us that work in a teaching field, some way other people should be jealous of us because we have the opportunity to observe their children for a full hour or more. We have the sole responsibility to communicate with that student from back history to future history. And each one of those students have an individual responsibility to develop their resources. Each teacher has a responsibility to see to it that they are put in an environment and they are cultured and they are fertilized so they can develop. And then one day, one of the rich ones came to my door, stuck her head in, called one of my students. She crossed my line. I rushed out there to her. Who are you? Red-headed, freckled. And he told his mother, I'm not going anywhere. I'm learning in this classroom, Mama, I'm going to stay here. And slammed the door in her face. I started saying, goody, 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 goody. Yes. That has been a long time ago, it seems like, in the annals of time. Today in Oklahoma City, I have more kids than you can dream of. If you would see me coming home, you would think that somebody has died for the flowers and the honors that have come to me from the parents of my community. 3 weeks ago, a grand wizard came to Oklahoma City and ran an ad saying that he wanted the white kids. We immediately in NAACP called a meeting and we brought the family together, the blacks, the whites, and the Jews. And our rabbi read something, Rabbi Packner read something that was so, it was just out of sight. We formed a Lord's circle and we say, we shall overcome. And the next day we were ready for the Ku Klux Klan. He went to one of our schools, the kids stood across the street and booed him. So you get your behind out of this city. And all at once he canceled all of his plans to visit each school. I'm trying to say that I'm proud of NAACP. I'm proud of what NAACP has done. I'm proud of its history. I'm proud of its people. And therefore I have a commitment, a solid commitment to NAACP. I'm not going to beg you to become members of the NAACP. I'm not going to beg you to contribute to the fighting fund for freedom. I'm not going to do it. Because the blood of untold millions of blacks and whites that gave their life for freedom cries out to you from the graveyards of America. And they speak to you. And they say, look what NAACP is trying to do. Put people together. Develop people's potentials. Trying to find the answers to better racial relations. And now I have some facts, and then I'm through. There's some things that I would like for you to do as NAACPers. First, I want you to make sure that everybody, excuse me, that everybody in this state is counted. Now let me give you some facts. In 1970, according to the Census Department, 7.7% of the blacks were not counted. 7.7%, compared with 1.9% of the whites. Now here are some sad facts. 106 congressional districts have lost population since 1907. For example, 15 districts in New York, 7 in Chicago, 7 in Los Angeles, 5 in Philadelphia, 5 in Los Angeles. More than 1/3 of the total black voting age population and 9 of the 15 black representatives live in those districts. And they're going to become the victims of redistricting. The black incumbent representative districts have lost from 2.7% to 28% of the population between 1970 and 1978, and the facts are not in for 1979. Black member districts are believed to be 9.5% to 31.4% in 1980, and they were in 1970. Among the 20 congressional districts that are threatened, with the highest decrease in population, 9 are now held by black members in Congress. Out of the 5 districts that have already been told that they are going to be redistricted, 4 of the congressional districts are represented by blacks today. 5 states with a total of 8 black congressmen are expected to lose 11 congressional seats this year. It's no secret New York will lose 4, Ohio 2, Illinois 2, Pennsylvania 2, and Michigan 1. Now, this reduction of black representation in government is going to have a profound effect on America. Now, when you look at it in theory, it might not look so bad, but let's look at it in reality. There are a combination of factors involved. First, between 1970 and 76, the black population followed the white flight into the suburbs. Now, it simply means that between this period, blacks moved into white areas and whites moved out. In fact, it became 1/2 black and 1/2 for rent. Then the blacks took out after the whites. Then the whites moved further to the suburbs. And somebody from California called me last night and said, guess whose houses are sliding down? I wasn't there too. Now, the second fact that we're going to have to deal with, many whites in America today continue to be reluctant to vote for black candidates. I ran for the United States Senate in my state. And I think of all the things that I've ever done, that probably was the most satisfying. And I traveled my state from one side of it to the other. And I looked at my white brothers, and many of them told me, Clara, I just can't vote for a black person. I said, then vote for me. And it was a funny thing. It was a funny thing. There were a lot of black people that came to me and said, Clara, I just can't vote for you because I don't think you're going to make it. And I said, vote for me. Even if I don't make it, I will not be the first one to lose the senatorial race in my state. I'm happy to tell you there were 12 in the race, and I was number 7, third. As you look at the black congressional districts in America, they are confined to areas where at least 40% of the population is black. And the fourth one is one that is embarrassing for me to tell you. And I apologize. I apologize to Martin Luther King, to Medgar Evars, and to others that have died for the rights of freedom for black people. I apologize to the Moors who were blasted into eternity on that Christmas Eve night in Florida. On the average, with all of our education, fewer than 50% of the eligible blacks in America vote. Now that's a shame. Count all that the deltas, the zetas, the sigmas, count them all. Count all the preachers, count all the bootleggers, 50%. Now that's a disgrace. You can't hide behind that excuse, literacy test, poll tax, all of that stuff of the past. So what we've got to do as NAACPers, we've got to say to these black people, get up off of your behinds and vote. I got a voter's registration slip in my pocketbook now, I carry it. And I'm not going to do business with you. You'll never dress my hair if you're not a registered voter. We've got to get tough with these non-registered voters. Now let me tell you why. I was down in Alabama during Wallace's day. I saw him on television talking about niggers. Oh, it sounded good to those that love Wallace. Never, never, nigger, never, never. And I was invited back to the Teachers Association in Birmingham, Alabama. They rolled Mr. Wallace in. I shared a platform with him. And Mr. Wallace said, brothers and sisters. You know, you can take that vote and you can see some mysterious happenings. Reverend Sullivan, Leon Sullivan, shocked America last week because he spoke directly to President Carter and said President Carter does not have the Negro's vote in his pocket. Now, I don't know how many Carter fans are in here. I have written down what I'm going to say about President Carter so I can get it straight. And I don't want anybody to leave out here with the wrong information. Now, fortunately, we got a smile in President Carter. President Carter smiled all over this nation. The black people was expecting something out of President Carter. They wanted more than a smile in president. Tonight, black people must send a message to the President of the United States. It's going to be a hard message. Very hard. And you're going to tell me what other black Carter supporters are telling me. You're going to tell me that Carter has appointed more black judges than any other president, and I'm going to say yes. Out of 152, he appointed 22. You think that's good? I don't. In the cabinet, we have a shift of one black woman that has been shifted from one cabinet post to another. You say that's good. I say there must be a black man somewhere in America. I say that. And Miss Harris is my friend. But if you notice, if you trace the history of the political pie, it goes from here and this one's still going, well, you're playing the same card over and over. Now, in other words, I know the generals that President Carter has appointed. For example, we now have 8 Air Force generals. Good. We now have a few more generals in the Army. Good. But then, as students of history, we must find out what is the ratio of blacks in the United States Army. Then, after we look at the figures, then we can make an intelligent decision. Now, in 1976, maybe you in Indiana rejoiced when Jimmy Carter said these words, and I quote him directly from his inaugural address. We want to have faith again. That's what he said. Somewhere I want to tell Mr. Jimmy Carter that black people have always had faith in America. For example, when Christmas Addicts died at the Boston Massacre, he expressed his faith in America. I wanted to tell President Carter that when my dad went to France on a segregated ship to fight in World War I, he had faith in America and believed that it would be a better day for his children. Oh, Martin Luther King had faith in America. He showed that faith all over the world. And then President Carter said in his inaugural address, we want to be proud again. I want to let President Carter knows that black people have always been proud. In fact, my grandmother taught me this poem: of all the women in the world, the black woman is the pearl. She's a diamond of a race, a valuable gem in a place. All through slavery, she stood her test. That's why we know that she's the best. On she goes with blistered hands. She has to work day and night. Then, President Carter scared me to death with these words: we just want the truth again. We just want the truth again. That's what he said in his inaugural speech. As I listened that cold day in January, I wanted to yell out and say, Mr. President, what kind of truth do you want again? The truth that we lived in a segregated nation and paid the Indians for their labor and refused to pay. We paid the Indians for their land and refused to pay the blacks for their labor. Mr. President, I'm still looking for my 40 acres and a mule. We worked 89,960 days without a payday. I would like to collect some back interest. The truth is that the President of the United States, the leader of a free world, belongs to a segregated church. Now that's the truth. That's the truth. Can you imagine the President of the United States standing on the brink of history, some 20 years from the 20th century, and then down in Georgia teaching a segregated Sunday school class? And I think those of you that are supporting President Carter, you better tell him he better get his spiritual business straight. Now I certainly realize the world crisis that we are facing. But I know enough about love to know that if a man continues to make love to everybody else except the people, except his own wife, he's in some serious sexual trouble. In other words, I am saying that unless President Carter now, he's not in a class with Kennedy, Bush, Crane, and all the rest of them. He doesn't have to talk about what he's going to do. He is the President of the United States now, and he can do it. You go to Chicago, go to New York, 12%, between 12 and 15% of blacks unemployed. Now how shall I close it off? I should close it all by saying to Mr. Carter, Mr. Carter, you are president. We love you. We voted for you. 98% of us. Now, we want some honey. We want some homogenized milk. You've gotten the cream of the black crop. But somewhere down in the bottom of that bag, people are crying out for jobs. People are crying out for decent homes. Let's homogenize the milk. If you don't, Mr. Carter, but we can't do it with 50% of us not voting. If we can march in 98%, we can say, if you don't, Mr. Carter. If you don't, Mr. Carter. And I would like to close with two things, two stories. A story is the white church. I feel so sorry for the white church. Beautiful churches, outstanding radio and television presentations. For example, in my state, Oral Roberts, a great religious leader, dedicated himself to Christ. But when he got ready to build a university, the black people lived on the north side of town, and guess where the religious leader put that university? On the south side of town. That university has a prayer tower that you can't believe it. It costs millions of dollars. Yet, in North Tulsa, where black people live, it's no communication between that university and the black university. Yet the missionaries are going all over the world. I feel sorry for the white preachers, Reverend Yates. You tell me all the time, Clara, I wish I could help you. And I said, I wish you would put your Bible down and quit preaching if you can't come and help black people in America. The black churches have always been our haven. Our NAACP meetings have been held there. Our ministers have been the leaders, and we salute you. When Martin Luther King told the black preachers off, He said, you are the one that have the responsibility because you have the ears and you have the eyes of the masses, and you should take the leadership. And if you don't take the leadership on Monday, don't take my money on Sunday. We must look at the affirmative action programs. In my state, President Lottie, we have some funny things going on. Yesterday, I sat down with the leadership of my state as they are wrestling over a custodian problem. There's a black custodian that came to me because he was a supervisor. He told me a story and a story of other blacks that were sweeping the floors of our state capitol. And I went out because as I understood the affirmative action program, it was one of effort. It was one of study, and it was one of documented facts and results. And I went out there and I asked that white leadership this question. How many people does this black man, Mr. Slaughter, supervise? And he wanted to tell me about what a good worker he was, how much money he was making. I said, I'm not interested in that. How many people does he supervise? And he told me no. And I said, then your affirmative action program becomes a joke. I'm trying to say that we've got to look at the affirmative action program in every angle, and the affirmative action program must be real. I interviewed Vice President Mondale in Louisville, Kentucky, and I asked the Vice President, sir, you are the Vice President. You have a strong affirmative action program, and you're telling this nation about it. How many blacks do you have? Or just name one black that you have on your staff in a policy-making position. And that Vice President turned red. He looked at me and I looked at him and I said, how many, sir? And he said, your name, please. I said, Clara Luper. He said, I'll write and let you know. I knew the answer. I knew the answer. Now, what do I recommend? Those of you that are appreciative, blacks and whites, and don't let white people get off. Don't let white people get off the hook by saying, you know, I'm white and I don't belong there. Why? What's so different about your case? You belong in NAACP, white people, Indian people, red people, green people. You belong. You don't have to have a special invitation. You are your own invitation. Now, what must we do in closing? I have turned some words around. For example, people say that those of us in NAACP are evil. So let's turn that word around and spell it backward, and it means that NAACP will live. NAACP will live. Don't let anybody fool you. If you never take out a membership, it will live. In Oklahoma City, my young NAACP group has just 2 years ago finished paying for a building that they worked and paid $25,000 for some 10 years ago, and then it was bombed, and then they had it rebuilt. They have their own executive officers, and we have presidents of the NAACP that are 6 years old, 5 years old. We meet every Monday night. We have college students. We have high school students. And when we go to Miami this year, we are going there to win the awards. Don't worry if you don't get discouraged because even the rocks will cry. NAACP has been called a dog, but I would like for you to turn that word around. And it spells God, which God has given us something to hold on to and something to dream about. And then when they talk about my blackness, I say to my white brothers, if you want to talk about my blackness, if you want to do something about the situation, just have a vocabulary operation on the word blackness and take out the word black and see what I like. And if you have sense enough to furnish it, do it. And they call me a nigger. And I said I even go a bit further. Because when you say nigger to me, it reminds me of a river in Africa that takes a G out, and it shows you that this old water will run forevermore. And finally, so what's NAACP about? It's a coat of many colors. It has many tributaries. It has people that can perform in many different functions. It's an old ship that started sailing in sailing in 1909 and continue to sail on. Where are we going to get our strength to carry on? Oh, I wish my dad could have gone on with me. In 1957, I stood by his bed as he looked at me and said, Clara, your dad's going to die. I wanted so much in my life to take my children to the zoo. In Oklahoma City, we could only go on Thursday, and he was working. I wanted so much to take you out to dinner. I wanted to do something for you, but I'm going to die. No longer will you have the voice of your daddy saying, move on. Then, my dad went on to heaven, never having an opportunity to drink a cup of coffee in a public restaurant. And then as you look around in your families and as you climb the ladder of success and think about all of the dreams and the aspirations that you represent. And then you think about John F. Kennedy on that cold day in January when he said this torch is going to be handed to a new generation. And then you think about Martin Luther King, who gave us something to hold on to, a dream of a better day. And then you look at yourself and you ask yourself a question. Am I a fool? Am I a fool? In other words, am I a hog? In other words, the world is looking for the nine lepers that were healed and were so ungrateful.